Brendan Tobin and Sean Levine on the BetQL Network.
Well, for the first time in 20 years, we have an undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. And BT, I had my money on a draw, and I came pretty close, but I did not win because tell us who the new champion is.
Alexander Usyk by split decision. Judges had it 115, 112 for Usyk. One had it 114, 113 Fury. And then the final decider, 114, 113. So that knockdown ends up winning Alexander Usyk the championship because he has it even. But, of course, you have a 10-8 round. So the 6-6 split for Usyk that way on that judge's scorecard comes with the extra point. So he wins based on that ninth round, that colossal ninth round that swung the fight.
So it took 20 years for us to have an undisputed heavyweight champion. Now that we have one, I'd assume that Usyk, sits on the shelf for a while and then figures out who gets his next shot.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing, Sean. I knew you were going to come to me with that because, when you have two wins over.
Exactly 3 minutes ago, dude. I got to ask you what's next.
I understand. I mean, I got to think that the immediate thing is, right, run it back. You have a fight that close against Tyson Fury. I got to think the immediate is, hey, Tyson Fury yet again. Let's do that fight one more time. Beaten Anthony Joshua. Anthony Joshua's riding high right now, but he's almost in a, if I could use a UFC parallel for everybody, like a Max Holloway, Volkanovski situation. Like he's already lost to Usyk twice. So you can't do that. Deontay Wilder, he just lost. So all your familiar faces, he's beaten Daniel Dubois. Joe Parker has had a bit of a resurgence. I don't know if that gets anybody, in the jellies. Yeah, exactly. So my point is, I would say a run it back is the most likely scenario for Alexander Usyk.
If they do run it back, what do you think the odds look like? Because I think that's a pretty obvious thing. I asked the question just because I knew that's what you were going to say. That has to be what goes on, in my opinion. Not to mention for Tyson Fury, that really has to happen because his stock right now is not sky high, right? Like now he's coming off of a loss tonight. He's coming off a questionable win decision versus Francis Ngannou. If it's not a rematch for him, it's probably some dude that nobody's heard of, a tune-up fight, if you will. I can't imagine that it makes sense for him to fight Anthony Joshua or something like that. Another fight against Deontay Wilder makes no sense. He kind of needs the rematch. In the case of Usyk, the biggest money fight, the most eyeballs you could get on, based on the way this fight just happened, would be a rematch. And then if somehow, let's say, just for the sake of this conversation, Fury can win, then we would have a trilogy, which in boxing is gold for everybody involved. So, yeah, we're going to get this again.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, the only young up-and-comer I could look at who's been getting a lot of publicity lately is like a Jared Anderson. But, and then, so there's probably publicity-wise. But I think that's too much for the young guy. I think that's throwing him to the wolves, basically. Honestly, looking at the rankings right now and all of them, man, probably, if Deontay Wilder could beat Zhang coming up on their card, he could maybe, if he does something thrilling, he could throw himself back into the mix just because he's always entertaining. But I would say, yeah, probably Joe Parker, honestly. Like, the former WBO champ, he has the WBO interim belt. He's probably the guy, if it's not Fury. And yeah, that, unless you're going to do that in New Zealand, I don't really know how much business that does.
Speaking of fight dates, let's talk about some UFC fights that have been announced. Official for UFC 304. You kind of called this one on last week's show. In England, this is Leon versus Bilal and Tom Aspinall versus Curtis Blades. Let's go ahead and start with Leon and Bilal. This one has been teased for a long time. This is a fight that most people thought we were going to see at UFC 300. What's your early lean on Rocky versus Bilal? Remember the name Muhammad.
I'm leaning Leon Edwards. I think that I have a lot of respect for Bilal Muhammad. I don't really understand why like they put the runaround on him. It seems strange to me. Like he couldn't build up a fight just like Colby Covington wouldn't. It's going to be in Manchester, so I feel like Leon's going to get the big pop. So I don't understand why this was such a big problem. It almost reminds me of like them being forced to give Damian Maia a title shot. Like, he's not that boring. He's had some decent performances. But they have fought before. Leon, before the whole eye poke thing, was having some success in the early goings of that fight. I think Leon is not a guy where you could say your typical striker, oh, he's going to get absolutely mauled. No, I mean, look, we've seen him against Colby, against Kamaru Usman. This guy is not afraid to go take on, heavy grapplers. So I lean Leon Edwards.
I'm kind of interested to see the press conference leading up to this one because, as you said, Leon's been accused of being boring, even though when he's in the octagon, he's far from it. Bilal, same thing. I wonder if Bilal tries to get under his skin, tries to be somebody that he's not during the press conference, because you're right. A lot of people are like, oh, really? This is a fight that has been talked about for a while, and finally here we are. It's going to be good once it happens. I wonder what the buildup looks like. Kind of, I can say the same thing for Curtis Blaydes versus Tom Aspinall. Like, that's one of those things where outside of the octagon, my interest isn't really there for those guys back and forth. But once they get going, I can't wait for that fight.
Yeah, I don't know what the odds look like. I don't know if Jay could find that for us for right now, but I would be curious, like, is there a number that could convince me to bet Curtis Blaydes? Because
no,
I'd imagine the early lines are Tom Aspinall are very heavy, and I feel like, Curtis Blaydes is really dangerous. Like, he's not a bum. This guy goes in there and has been very, very close to the belt many a time, and then he usually just runs into somebody with a hammer, with an absolute hammer, and all of a sudden you're like, all right, back to the line, Curtis Blaydes, sorry. But he has basically been a top 3 heavyweight for 6 years. Like, I just think that there could be a number where I'd be like, I'm gonna sprinkle a little something on Curtis Blaydes. You can't talk me out of it. I think that Curtis Blaydes is that now. Is it 2-1? You got to sweeten the pot a little bit for me, a little bit more. But the one thing that I'd be interested in, though, here's what I would say.
Jake got those odds for us. Plus 200 if you want the underdog, minus 240 for Tom Aspinall. So you say that's not enough for you. Maybe you wait till fight.
I think that's what I'm going to do, because I feel like the odds are going to – I feel like the Aspinall hype train with the John Jones stuff is going to go, which will mean the Curtis Blaydes odds will also go wider up. I think I'm going to maybe sprinkle something on Razor that night, because here's my thinking. If he gets out of the first round, and then Aspinall's got to be like, whew. All of a sudden I'm thinking to myself, all right, I like it. I think that this could potentially go. I don't love my chances because Aspinall's looked like an absolute demon, but he's got a lot on his hands in this fight. I mean, this is not a Pavlovich, who, yes, was the scariest man that we all thought, but he diced him up. But Curtis Blaydes is battle tested. This guy, and also we've seen with Curtis Blaydes, he can get through and weather some storms and still go get a win. So I'm just telling you, I don't think this is a layup for Tom Aspinall. I know that you, as basically half Manchesteran, you are president of the Tom Aspinall fan club. You're laughing at me, but I'm just telling you, there's a number. If there's a number it gets to, I'm going to be like, I'll throw a little something on Curtis Blaydes that night.
And I'm laughing at the Manchesteran. Are people from Manchester known as Manchesterans? That can't be right. Manchesterans? There you go. Maybe. I don't know. Oh,
Manchester, it sounds like a Star Wars spinoff.
It really
the
does.
Manchester.
Man, I would watch that. I would check that
Baby
one
Yoda
out.
with Yoda with a pint of ale.
You're damn right I lead that fan club, because it'll be done in one. That's what Tom Aspinall does. That's what he's done to everybody. What's Curtis Blaydes? You talking about maybe if it goes into deep waters? It doesn't with Tom Aspinall. That dude doesn't even need floaties. Tom Aspinall finishes his fights quick. He's faster. He's a better wrestler. At this point, I think he punches harder. He's younger. He has every advantage. And I've seen Curtis Blaydes lose inside the octagon in different ways. I'm a little bitter because I've lost some money on Blaydes over the years. In the case of Aspinall, the only time that he's ever even been vulnerable is when he's got injured. Like his other fights, he's dominated. So if you want to lose your money, if there's a certain number you can get talked into on Curtis Blaydes and then throw your money away, go ahead. I know you work hard for your money to provide for your family. I ain't doing it.
Well, look, yes, when you say he lost in a different way, he really hasn't. Like he loses to monster power punchers, which Aspinall is very capable of doing that. Like we've seen,
he can do that.
He could butcher right through you, and he's maybe not the knockout one punch artist, but he's going to hit you probably with 3 shots, and you won't know it hit you before you're already on the canvas. But he's beaten some quality guys over his career, so I just think that you can't rule it out with Curtis Blades. I don't think he's. I get why Aspinall is the deserved favorite right now. He's the interim heavyweight champion. He made Pavlovich look like a punk, and I mean, like, I thought Pavlovich was the scariest man on the planet, even scarier than Francis Ngannou, and he just didn't matter. Didn't matter. Still went through him like he was nothing. But I don't know. I just think that there will be a number that I think will be very much sweet for me on that night, and I'll be like, I'm just gonna throw a little something on Razor.
You know who Razor Blades is? He's like a good friend of the show, the Killer Gorilla. That's who he reminds me of. And I love Jared Cannonier, but like, he fought for a belt. Cannonier fought for a belt, which is crazy, but he did. Also on this card, by the way, I didn't see this one coming. Paddy Pimblett versus Bobby Green. That's a cool fight.
It is a cool fight. I think it's a nice test for Paddy Pimblett. It seems like about the waters that he should be in for sure. I think this is a big one for him because it's like, hey, if you can't beat Bobby Green, then what is he? Everybody feels like he's been either given gifts or fed an easy schedule. Bobby Green's got cardio for days. So there could be some issues there for Paddy for sure.
You're a hater when it comes to Paddy the Baddy. As much as I love Aspinall, you just have completely jumped off that ship. They're going to be chanting, "Oh, Paddy's a baddie." That crowd is going to be insane. Speaking of crowds, we've got fight going on tonight as we speak. We'll keep you updated on the Octagon, anything that's happening in the world of boxing coming up on the other side. We'll talk some more UFC. Big second hour. Marcel Dorff joins the show as well, and then we'll give you our best odds before we dip out of here. Don't go anywhere. We appreciate checking us out here on this Saturday evening. It is Tapped Out right here on the BetQL Network.